There are jokes that land because they're clever. And there are jokes that land because they're cruel. My husband chose the second kind. The room was expensive in that quiet way people pay extra for. Low lighting, linen tablecloths, glassware thin enough to feel fragile in your hand. Everyone dressed like they had something to protect. We were 10 people deep into a dinner party hosted by friends who liked to remind everyone, subtly, relentlessly, how well they were doing. Private equity, architecture, venture capital. Titles that sounded impressive until you listened too closely. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't out of place. I belonged there, even if no one had bothered to ask what I did anymore. That was the first thing to go in my marriage. My introductions. At some point between the second course and the wine that cost more than my first month of rent after college, the conversation turned to sacrifice. Careers paused, opportunities declined, supportive spouses. Someone laughed and said, "Every successful man has one." That's when my husband leaned back in his chair. He didn't look at me. He looked around the table, smiling like he was about to perform. "Well," he said, swirling his wine, "Emily had big dreams once, but she figured out pretty quickly that not everyone's meant to build something." The laughter didn't come right away. There was a pause. The kind people leave when they're deciding whether something is acceptable. He kept going. "She's much happier now," he added. "Right, Em? Less stress, no pressure, just supporting the real work." The table laughed. Not loudly, comfortably. Someone nodded. Someone else took a sip of wine like this was a shared understanding. I felt it then. Not shock. Clarity. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't careless. He was rehearsed. I looked at him finally. He still hadn't turned my way. He was enjoying the reaction too much. That was the moment I understood something important. He didn't just disrespect me. He needed to. Men who are secure don't perform like that. They don't need witnesses. I smiled. Small, polite, controlled. "Funny," I said. "I don't remember quitting. I remember being pushed." The laughter stopped. He turned toward me then, surprised, not by what I said, but by the fact that I'd spoken at all. "Oh, come on," he replied lightly. "We're just joking." That word, just. It's what people use when they want absolution without accountability. I nodded. "Of course," I said. "Jokes tell the truth faster." Silence again. Someone cleared their throat. Someone changed the subject. But something had already shifted. Not in the room, in me. I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel small. I felt finished. On the drive home, he laughed about it. "You should have seen their faces," he said. "Relax. They know I'm kidding." I watched the city lights pass the window. "No," I replied. "They know you weren't." He scoffed. "You're reading into it." That's what men say when they want women to doubt their own intelligence. I didn't argue. Arguing would have implied uncertainty. Instead, I asked a single question. "Do you envy me?" He didn't answer right away. That pause told me more than any confession could. "Why would I envy you?" he said finally. I looked at him calmly. "Because I could build something without you," I said. "And you know it." He laughed too fast. The conversation ended there. But the marriage did not survive the night. Not because of the joke, because of the truth underneath it. I didn't cry that night. I didn't pack a bag. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, doing something far more dangerous. I was planning, and while he slept beside me, comfortable, certain, admired, I made a quiet decision. If I was going to be a joke, I would control the punchline. The joke didn't end at the table. It followed us home. Not in words, in posture. He moved through the apartment like someone who had won something. Loose, buoyant, humming under his breath while he loosened his tie. He poured himself a drink he didn't need and offered me one he knew I wouldn't take. "Still mad?" he asked, like irritation was the worst charge I could bring. I didn't answer. That unsettled him more than anger ever had. He sat across from me on the couch, legs spread, glass balanced easily in his hand. The picture of ease. He'd learned that posture years ago, somewhere between his first promotion and his first time realizing people laughed when he spoke. "You embarrassed me," he said finally. There it was. Not I hurt you, not I crossed a line. You embarrassed me. I corrected you, I replied. My voice was level. There's a difference, he smirked. See? This is what I mean. You always need to prove something. I looked at him then. Really looked. The tailored suit, the confident mouth, the eyes that flicked away for half a second when he thought I might see through him. You made me the punchline, I said, and you're surprised I spoke. He shrugged. It was harmless. No, I said. It was strategic. That word landed harder than I expected. He leaned forward. You think everything is an attack? No, I replied. Just the ones that are. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unfamiliar. This wasn't one of our old arguments, the circular ones where I explained myself into exhaustion and he waited me out. This was different. I wasn't trying to be understood. I was stating terms. You used me to get approval, I continued, from people you don't even respect. He laughed once, sharp, defensive. You're projecting. That was his favorite word when he felt cornered. I watched their faces, I said. They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing with you, because you offered me up. He stood abruptly, the charm evaporating. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're acting like I ruined your life over one comment. No, I said quietly. You revealed it. That night, he slept easily. I didn't. I lay there cataloging moments the way you do when something finally clicks. Not obsessively, precisely. The way he'd stopped asking about my work years ago. The way he'd joke when I talked about starting something of my own. The way his praise always came with a leash. You're so good at organizing. You're amazing at supporting. You don't need the stress I deal with. At the time, it sounded like care. Now I heard the subtext. Stay here. Don't outgrow me. I got out of bed before sunrise and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop closed, coffee untouched. I didn't need to research yet. I needed to decide something more fundamental, whether I was going to keep negotiating for dignity. The answer came easily. No. He noticed the change within days. Not because I was cold, because I was neutral. I stopped volunteering explanations, stopped filling silences, stopped softening statements to preserve his comfort. It unnerved him. You're distant, he said one evening, watching me from the doorway as I worked. I'm focused. On what? I looked up, met his eyes. Myself. That was when the envy stopped pretending to be humor. He began criticizing things that had never bothered him before. The way I dressed, the hours I kept, the people I spoke to. Who are you on the phone with? You seem awfully busy lately. You don't laugh like you used to. I smiled at that one. Because I'm not performing anymore. That earned me a look I'd never seen from him. Not anger, something smaller, fear. He started dropping comments in front of others again. Quieter now, edged with irritation instead of charm. She's always planning something. Emily gets ideas. She'd be dangerous if she had time. The irony didn't escape me. One night, after another carefully barbed remark at a small gathering, a woman pulled me aside in the bathroom. He doesn't like that you're changing, she said softly, like it was a confession. I know. You should be careful. I washed my hands, dried them slowly. No, I said. I should be free. She didn't argue. The final moment came not with a fight, but with a sentence. We were alone in the kitchen. He was irritated. I was calm. The usual roles had reversed, and he hated it. You're not as impressive as you think, he said suddenly. You'd struggle without me. I didn't flinch. I know, I replied. That's why you're nervous. He stared at me. I continued, measured and exact. You've spent years making sure I depended on you. You wouldn't have done that if you didn't know what I could become. His mouth opened, closed. For the first time, he had nothing ready. That was the moment I stopped being his wife in anything but name. And somewhere, beneath the irritation and control and mockery, he understood something too. If I left, I wouldn't crawl. I would build, and he would have to watch. I didn't announce anything. I didn't warn him. I prepared, quietly, methodically. without the emotional indulgence of needing him to understand. I opened an account in my own name, updated my credentials, reactivated contacts I'd let go dormant because they made him uncomfortable. I watched him closely while I did it. Men like him believe control is permanent. They confuse habit with loyalty. They assume silence means compliance. He mistook my calm for surrender. I let him. The first thing I reclaimed was time. I stopped aligning my schedule with his, stopped planning dinners, stopped orbiting his moods. When he asked where I was going, I answered plainly. Out. Not where. Not with whom. Just out. That single word irritated him more than any argument ever had. He tried kindness next. The performative kind. Flowers, compliments, casual mentions of trips we might take once things settle. You've just been stressed, he said one night, reaching for my hand. We're good. You and me. I withdrew my hand gently. No, I said. You and me is over. You just haven't caught up yet. He laughed like I was joking. That was fine. I wasn't in a hurry. I packed slowly. Not boxes. Drawers. One at a time. Anything essential went first. Anything sentimental I evaluated with ruthless clarity. Did this belong to me, or to the version of myself I'd outgrown? Most things stayed. That apartment was full of artifacts from a life built around him. I didn't need proof of where I'd been. I needed space for where I was going. The night I finally told him, it wasn't dramatic. We were sitting across from each other. Neutral ground. No witnesses. I'm leaving, I said. He blinked. Once. When? Already decided. His jaw tightened. So that's it? You just walk away? Yes. After everything I've given you? I met his eyes. You didn't give, I replied. You managed. That landed. He stood abruptly. Anger flared. Accusations followed. You'll regret this. You're not equipped for the real world. You'll come back. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I said one last thing. I'm not angry. I'm uninterested. That's the sentence men like him never recover from. I left the next morning with one suitcase and no forwarding address. He watched from the doorway, arms crossed, wearing certainty like armor. He thought I was bluffing. He thought silence meant collapse. He thought absence would bring me back, smaller and apologetic. He underestimated the relief of not being watched. The first night alone, I didn't cry. I slept. Deeply. Heavily. Like my nervous system had finally been dismissed from duty. The next morning, I woke up with something unfamiliar. Hunger. Not for comfort, for momentum. I didn't miss him. I missed myself. And I was done pretending those were the same thing. I didn't leave to prove anything. I left because staying would have required shrinking further, and I had reached the physical limit of that act. Whatever I built next would not include an audience that needed me small. And whatever he told himself afterward, that I'd fail, that I'd fade, that I'd come crawling back, was none of my concern. I was already moving. I didn't land anywhere impressive. No skyline, no statement address, just a small, clean place with thin walls and a landlord who didn't ask personal questions. I paid the deposit without flinching and felt a flicker of something sharp and unfamiliar. Ownership. Not of the space, of the decision. The first week was brutal in its honesty. No one cared where I was, no one checked in, no one watched. For years, I'd lived under constant evaluation. His glances, his moods, his subtle assessments of whether I was being useful enough to justify my presence. Now there was nothing, no applause, no critique, just me and the work I hadn't started yet. That's when doubt tried its first move. Quietly. It sounded reasonable, responsible. Be careful, you don't have a safety net. This could get embarrassing. I listened. Then I got up anyway. Starting with nothing strips away the luxury of fantasy. There was no following my passion. There was competence, skill, leverage. I took inventory the way serious people do, not of dreams, but of assets. What I knew, what I could learn fast, what people paid for when emotions were removed from the equation. I didn't ask myself what would make me happy. I asked what would make me independent. That answer came quickly. My days became disciplined, unromantic, up early, work blocks, no wasted motion. I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years, not with apologies, not with explanations, with clarity. I'm building something. I'm available. I deliver. Some didn't respond. Some tested me. A few said yes. That was enough. Money came slowly at first. Honest money. Earned money. The kind that doesn't flatter you, the kind that doesn't promise permanence. I tracked every dollar. I didn't celebrate small wins. I treated them like proof of concept. I learned to sit alone with my fear without turning it into drama. That skill changed everything. Fear loses power when it isn't entertained. There were nights I ate standing up because sitting felt indulgent. Mornings where exhaustion pressed against my spine and whispered that I'd miscalculated. I ignored it. Not because I was brave, because going back would have required explaining myself, and I was done with explanations. No one clapped when I landed my first real contract. No one saw the revision cycles, the second-guessing, the internal corrections. That was the point. I wasn't building something to be admired. I was building something that worked. I didn't think about him, not deliberately, but occasionally, inevitably, I'd imagine him telling the story of my departure. She needed space. She was lost. She'll be fine. Men like him turn women's exits into footnotes. It's how they protect their image. I let him have that illusion. Every hour I spent working quietly made it more expensive. There's a particular kind of confidence that grows when no one is watching. It isn't loud. It doesn't seek validation. It's the calm that comes from competence compounding. I felt it taking root. Slow, unimpressive, unstoppable. By the end of that first stretch, nothing about my life looked enviable from the outside. No glamour, no revenge, no grand reveal, just traction. And for the first time in years, I wasn't performing survival. I was practicing control. Starting with nothing teaches you something most people never learn. You don't need belief to move forward. You need discipline. Belief comes later. After the numbers stop lying, control only works when it's close. That's the mistake he made. He thought distance would weaken me. He didn't understand that distance was the point. By the time the work stopped feeling tentative, I had already changed. Not in a dramatic way, in a structural one. My days had edges now. Clear starts, clear finishes. I didn't drift. I executed. That alone separated me from most people. Momentum doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. One contract turned into two. Two turned into referrals. Referrals turned into trust. Not admiration, not praise. Trust. People stopped asking if I could deliver. They asked how fast. That's when I raised my rates. Quietly. No apology, no explanation. Anyone who hesitated wasn't my client anymore. The first time I said no to good money because it didn't fit the long-term structure, I sat back in my chair and exhaled slowly. That was power. Not dominance, not recognition. Choice. I stopped reacting to opportunities and started designing them. I noticed patterns others ignored. Gaps, inefficiencies, places where ego got in the way of outcomes. Men like my husband had taught me something unintentionally valuable, what insecurity looks like when it's well-dressed. I built around that. Not maliciously, clinically. My name began circulating in rooms I wasn't in. That's how you know something is real. Not when people compliment you to your face, when they invoke you without needing to. She's precise. She doesn't miss. She's expensive, but she's clean. I like that last one. Clean work is rare. I didn't post updates, didn't announce milestones. Success performed too loudly attracts the wrong kind of attention. I let my work speak to people who understood language beyond words. Then came the shift. The work stopped being just work. It became infrastructure. Systems instead of tasks, processes instead of effort. I hired carefully, slowly. People who didn't need babysitting or praise. People who respected silence. The first time I signed a contract that would have intimidated the old version of me, my hands didn't shake. That's how I knew I'd crossed a threshold. He found out through someone else. They always do. A mutual acquaintance, a casual mention, a tone that changed halfway through a sentence. Oh, Emily? Yes, she's doing very well. I wasn't there to see his reaction. But I know men like him, the smile would have stayed in place a fraction too long. The question would have come out casual and landed sharp. Doing what exactly? That's when envy stops being abstract. He reached out not long after. A neutral message. Polite, curious. Hope you're well. Heard you've been busy. No apology, no accountability, just reconnaissance. I didn't reply. Not because I was afraid, because he no longer had standing. What I was building had one defining feature. It did not need his permission, attention, or approval to exist. That alone would have unsettled him more than any public victory. Men like him don't fear failure, they fear irrelevance. The work kept scaling. The problems got more complex, the stakes higher. I adapted, not frantically, deliberately. Every decision moved me further from the woman who once sat at a dinner table and was reduced to a joke. Not because I proved him wrong, because I removed him from the equation entirely. Power isn't loud. It doesn't remind people where it came from. It simply changes the temperature of the room when it enters. And by then, I was no longer building to survive. I was building to endure. The first win didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet, heavy, final, like a door closing somewhere behind me. I remember the exact moment, not because it was dramatic, but because nothing in me rushed to celebrate. I was sitting at a plain desk, cheap chair, bad lighting. I refreshed an account I'd already checked twice that morning. The number was there, solid, real, cleared, enough to change my position permanently, enough that I would never again have to ask myself whether leaving him had been reckless. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I leaned back and closed my eyes for exactly 10 seconds. That was it. People imagine making it as easier. They're wrong. The first real win doesn't inflate you. It steadies you. It removes urgency. It quiets fear. It strips excuses of their power. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I was safe. And safety, earned alone, does something profound to a woman who was once treated like an accessory. I didn't tell anyone. Not friends, not former colleagues, certainly not him. I went for a walk instead. Same streets, same city, different posture. No one noticed. And that mattered more than they'd ever understand. From that moment on, every decision changed. I stopped chasing growth and started shaping it. I hired legal help, formalized structures, protected myself in ways I hadn't known I needed before. That's what real success does. It forces you to think forward instead of upward. The second shift was internal. I stopped proving. I didn't need to be impressive. I didn't need to be exceptional. I needed to be inevitable. There's a difference. Opportunities started coming with assumptions attached. That I would be flexible, that I would be grateful, that I would adjust. I didn't. My boundaries hardened. Not emotionally, but operationally. This is the scope, this is the price, this is the timeline. Take it or leave it. Most took it. Somewhere during that period, I realized something unsettling. I no longer imagined him watching. The imagined audience, his judgment, his dismissal, his envy, had faded. Not because I'd replaced it with confidence, because I no longer needed a witness. Still, the world has a way of looping back. I heard about him again, indirectly. Someone mentioned his name with a pause afterward, the conversational kind that signals a comparison without saying it. He's doing fine, they said. Then, more carefully, Emily's trajectory is interesting. Interesting? That's what people say when they're recalibrating old assumptions. He reached out again after that. Longer this time, warmer, proud of what you're building. Would love to catch up sometime. Proud. That word would have mattered once. I read it. I didn't respond. Silence isn't punishment. It's clarity. The first win wasn't about money. Money was just the receipt. The real win was this. I no longer needed to explain my absence. Not to him, not to anyone. I had crossed a line where my life made sense without a narrator. That night, I poured a glass of wine and drank it slowly. Not to celebrate, to mark something, an ending. The woman who once sat at a dinner table and let someone else define her value was gone. Not wounded, not bitter, just obsolete. He didn't notice right away. That's the part people misunderstand. Men like him don't track women once they believe they've been dismissed. They assume gravity only works one way. What changed wasn't his awareness. It was his need to be aware. The first sign came through someone else's voice. A mutual acquaintance. Casual. Careful. "I ran into your ex," they said, watching my face too closely. "He mentioned you." I didn't react. "That's new," they added. I nodded once. "Is it?" They hesitated. "He asked what you were doing now." There it was. Not "how are you?" Not "are you well?" What are you doing now? Men ask that when they're recalculating status. After that, the sightings increased. My name appearing in conversations that used to orbit him. My work referenced without context. My absence noticed where my presence had once been managed. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The distance that once protected him had become a liability. His messages changed tone. Less curious, more personal. "You crossed my mind today. Saw something that reminded me of you. Hope you're happy." Hope is what people offer when they want credit for goodwill without earning intimacy. I didn't respond. Each unanswered message rewrote our power dynamic without a single word from me. Then came the invitation. Public, strategic, a fundraiser, polished, visible. "I'll be there. Would be nice to see you." That was the tell. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to be seen talking, to place me back into a context he understood, to frame the narrative before others did it for him. I declined. No explanation. Just, "I won't be attending." That's when irritation replaced charm. I heard about it through the same channels men always leak through. "She's changed. She's difficult now. Success got to her." Interesting how boundaries become flaws when they're enforced. He tried one last angle. Concern. A classic. "You don't have to shut me out," he said, when he finally caught me on a call I didn't recognize in time. We shared a life. I paused. Not for him, for accuracy. "No," I replied. "We shared a stage. You needed an audience." Silence. Then softer. "You're being unfair." I smiled to myself. Men say that when fairness no longer benefits them. What he couldn't say, what sat heavy beneath every attempt, was the truth. He had assumed my trajectory depended on his gravity. He had assumed wrong. The real shift came when people stopped asking about him when they spoke to me. They didn't connect us anymore. They spoke as if we belonged to different chapters, different categories. That's when he lost patience. His final message was blunt. "I don't recognize you anymore." I read it once, then I deleted it. Recognition requires relevance. And by then, he was operating on an outdated version of me. Here's the part he never understood. I didn't succeed to be seen by him. I succeeded because I stopped orienting myself around men who needed me smaller than my potential. His noticing wasn't a milestone, it was a side effect. When envy matures, it doesn't sneer. It studies, it compares, it keeps score quietly and loses sleep. By the time he noticed me fully, I was already somewhere he couldn't follow without dismantling himself. And men like him never do that. They prefer to call it arrogance. Empires don't announce themselves. They emerge quietly after the scaffolding is already in place. By the time outsiders notice something solid, the foundations have been set for years. That's where I was. The work no longer lived on my shoulders alone. It moved without me pushing every hour. Decisions propagated, systems responded. I could step back, and nothing collapsed. That's when I knew it was real. Not hustle, not momentum, architecture. I stopped thinking in weeks and started thinking in quarters. Stopped asking, "Can this work?" Started asking, "How far does this scale before it breaks?" Those are different questions. Only one belongs to people with leverage. The language around me changed. Clients didn't ask for favors anymore. They asked for access. Teams didn't look to me for reassurance. They looked for direction. I became careful with my presence. Where I showed up mattered, where I didn't mattered more. My calendar was no longer full. It was intentional. Every meeting earned its place. Every conversation had purpose. I didn't explain why I was unavailable. I simply was. That's when the term started circulating. Not publicly, not officially. She's building an empire. People said it half joking, half wary. The word makes people uncomfortable, especially when applied to women. Good. With scale comes visibility. With visibility comes friction. People tested me. They questioned decisions they would have accepted from a man without blinking. They tried to soften my edges, frame my firmness as tone. I didn't correct them. I documented outcomes instead. Results don't argue, they conclude. Somewhere in this phase, I realized something quietly astonishing. I had become the woman men warned their wives about. Not because I was reckless or cruel, but because I was uncontained, unexplained, unowned. That kind of woman unsettles narratives built on control. He couldn't map me anymore. My work didn't resemble anything he understood. My network didn't intersect with his. I wasn't playing a higher version of his game. I'd exited the arena entirely. That's what he felt, but couldn't articulate. We crossed paths once, briefly, publicly. A room full of people who knew exactly who I was, without needing to be told who I'd been married to. He smiled, polite, tight. "Emily," he said, "you look busy." I nodded. Productive. That was it. No nostalgia, no accounting. I walked away mid-conversation because someone else needed my attention. Not performatively, naturally. That moment would have haunted him. Not because I ignored him, but because I didn't register him. Men can endure rejection. They unravel at irrelevance. The empire wasn't about dominance. It wasn't revenge. It was alignment. My values matched my decisions. My boundaries matched my reach. Nothing leaked. Nothing apologized. At night, I sometimes thought back to that dinner party. The linen, the laughter, the joke that had tried to shrink me. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just distance. The kind you feel toward a place you outgrew so thoroughly, it no longer exists for you. Empires don't rise out of spite. They rise when someone stops negotiating their worth. And by then, there's no punchline left. Only structure. Not to apologize, not to understand, to see if it still has access. It happened in a room designed for power to circulate quietly. No podiums, no announcements, just people who moved markets with phone calls and ruined weekends with delayed replies. I belonged there. That was no longer a question. I felt him before I saw him. That subtle shift in air when someone is out of alignment with the room they're standing in. He was dressed well, still sharp, still polished. But something was off. He was performing again. Only this time, no one needed the show. He waited until I was alone. Of course he did. Men like him always want a private moment to rewrite the narrative. "Emily," he said carefully, like he was approaching a skittish animal. "It's been a long time." I looked at him, calm, neutral. "Yes," I replied. "It has." He smiled, relieved that I hadn't cut him down immediately. "I've been following your work," he continued. "Impressive." There it was, the offering. Not admiration, permission. I didn't take it. "That's kind," I said, already preparing to disengage. But he wasn't finished. "I always knew you were capable of something like this," he added. "You just needed the right conditions." That sentence told me everything. He still needed to believe he'd been part of the cause. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said. "I needed the absence of you." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was devastating. He tried to recover. "That's not fair," he said lightly. "We both know things were complicated." I nodded once. They were. Then I looked past him, scanning the room. He noticed. That was when the desperation crept in. "You don't have to pretend I don't exist," he said. "We shared years." I met his eyes again, this time with precision. "I'm not pretending," I said. I moved on. People were watching now, not obviously, but enough. He lowered his voice. "You don't think any of this would have happened if we'd stayed together?" That question wasn't about me. It was about salvaging his self-concept. I answered him honestly. "No," I said. "I think it would have been impossible." He laughed softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've changed," he said. I smiled. Small, controlled. "So did your relevance." That was the end of the conversation. Not because I walked away, because he had nothing left to stand on. Later, someone mentioned him in passing, casually, briefly. "Oh, wasn't he married to you?" "Wasn't." Past tense. I nodded. "A long time ago?" And that was enough. There was no victory lap, no dramatic reversal, just a quiet, irreversible shift. The story he told about me no longer fit the facts. The story I told about myself didn't include him. History doesn't like being dismissed. It prefers resolution, closure. I didn't give it that. I gave it indifference. Some people think the final reckoning comes when the other person realizes what they lost. They're wrong. It comes when you realize you don't care whether they ever do. There was no final confrontation after that night. No phone call where he finally understood. No apology that landed cleanly. No dramatic unraveling I got to witness. Life isn't that cooperative. What there was instead was distance. Steady, irreversible distance. The kind that doesn't ache. He faded the way irrelevant things do. Not suddenly, not tragically, gradually. I'd hear his name less, then not at all. I'd see his world continue, but no longer intersect. The absence didn't feel like loss. It felt like accuracy. People sometimes asked cautiously if I was angry. I wasn't. Anger requires proximity. It requires investment. What I felt was resolved. I didn't build what I built to punish him. I built it because I refused to live inside someone else's ceiling. Because I'd learned what happens when your value is negotiated at dinner tables by people who benefit from your silence. Because I understood, finally, that being underestimated is only dangerous if you internalize it. The empire kept growing. Not recklessly, not endlessly, intentionally. I protected it the way you protect something you built with your nervous system intact. No chaos, no unnecessary exposure, just clarity. Every now and then, I'd remember the joke. Not with pain, with curiosity. How small he must have felt to need it. How confident he thought he was when he said it. How wrong he was. Here's the truth people don't like hearing. Some men don't lose you because they cheat or shout or fail. They lose you because they believe you too little. And belief is the one thing you can't rebuild once it's gone. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I stopped playing a game designed to keep me manageable. There was no revenge arc, no public shaming, just outcome. If you're looking for closure, this is it. I am not the woman he joked about. He is not the man who mattered. The room changed. The audience changed. And eventually, the story stopped needing him at all. That's the ending. No punchline, no applause. Just a woman standing in something she built, fully, cleanly, without needing anyone else to confirm it existed. And that, I've learned, is the only kind of ending that lasts.